All right, welcome. So today we're going to try and piece together a really massive puzzle. We're going to pull from history, from philosophy, even from visions of the future, all to make sense of right now. Because, let's be honest, it really feels like we're standing at some kind of major turning point, doesn't it?
And really, it all boils down to this one huge question. Are we actually building a kind of paradise on Earth, or are we just engineering our own collapse? Every big decision we make, every system we create, it feels like it's pushing us down one of these two very, very different roads. Are we about to create something amazing, or are we just walking the same path that's doomed countless civilizations before us?
So how do we even start to tackle that question? Well, let's use this quote as our guide. Think about what it's saying. It points to this really profound shift in how we see ourselves. First, you had materialism, which kind of closed our minds to anything spiritual or divine, what's above us. And then psychology came along and opened our minds to everything below us, the subconscious, our inner depths. This idea is going to be our framework for unpacking the mess we find ourselves in.
Okay, so let's start by looking back, way back. Because if you want to figure out where you're going, you first have to understand where others have been. And there's a really powerful warning for us in the history of Rome. When we think about the fall of Rome, we usually picture, what? Barbarians at the gates, right? Big armies. But the sources we're looking at suggest the real story, well, it's a little different. The real culprits were internal. They were these deep structural problems that basically ate away at the empire from the inside out, leaving it hollow and fragile.
Now, look at this number, 0.737. It might not look like much, but it tells an absolutely devastating story. It's something called the Gini coefficient, which is just a fancy way to measure inequality, and it comes from a Roman land register in Egypt. So to put it simply, a score of 0 means everyone has the same amount, perfect equality. A score of 1 means one single person owns everything. So 0.737, that is shockingly high. It means wealth was concentrated in the hands of a teeny tiny group of elites.
And here's the human side of that number. What does that kind of inequality actually do to a society? Well, it acts like a social poison. You had historians at the time like Sallust who saw it plain as day. He argued that this massive gap between the rich and everyone else was breeding incredible resentment and jealousy. And that envy, that frustration, it's what fueled the instability that eventually helped to bring the whole system crashing down. It wasn't just about money, it was about the very fabric of society tearing apart.
Okay, so that was Rome. Let's fast forward to our time. Think about it. We have all this amazing technology, right? So why does everything feel so fragile, so anxious? Well, the sources suggest that to find the roots of this modern malaise, we have to look back at the big ideas that have shaped our world over the last century and a half.
So the sources point to these four thinkers right here as basically the architects of the modern mind. Now don't get me wrong, each one of them was an absolute genius. But when you put their ideas together, the collective effect was, well, it was to systematically dismantle the traditional frameworks, the religious and philosophical beliefs that had pretty much given Western civilization its meaning for hundreds of years.
Let's start with Darwin. He basically flipped the old story completely on its head. For centuries, the idea was that some divine consciousness created the material world. Darwin came along and said, nope, it's the other way around. Dead, inert matter, over a very, very long and blind process, eventually produced consciousness. So in one move, humanity went from being a fallen angel to a risen ape.
Next up, Karl Marx. He went straight for the spiritual jugular. He argued that it isn't God who creates man, it's man who creates God. He famously called religion the opium of the people, seeing it as this kind of illusion, a distraction created by our economic conditions to keep the poor and oppressed from realizing how bad their situation really was.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, along came Freud. He delivered another huge blow, basically reducing all sacred beliefs to, well, a kind of psychological trick. He argued that the whole idea of God or religion was just a projection of our unresolved childhood issues. That feeling of being a helpless kid who needs a powerful father figure to protect them? He said we just project that onto the entire cosmos.
And finally, Nietzsche. He didn't just argue against God. His famous declaration was far more profound. When he said, God is dead, he wasn't just being provocative. He meant that the entire foundation for believing in God had crumbled. The whole religious worldview, he argued, was no longer a believable driving force in the modern world. And that left humanity completely unmoored, adrift in a giant, meaningless universe. So, okay, we've got this deep spiritual crisis. The big stories that used to hold us together are gone.
The obvious next question is, what does that do to our social structure? What happens to the shape of our society when the glue that binds it together dissolves?
So let's jump back to Rome again for a second, because it gives us a really clear picture. This chart, which is based on estimates from the sources, shows you a society that's been completely hollowed out. You've got this tiny sliver of elites at the very top, and then pretty much everyone else at the bottom. Notice what's missing? A real stabilizing middle class. It's almost non-existent.
Now, the sources we're drawing from propose this really simple but honestly powerful model for what a healthy civilization looks like. It needs all three classes. The rich, they're the ones pushing the frontier with new ideas and investments. The poor, they provide the labor and, frankly, the sheer numbers for demographic continuity. But the middle class? The middle class is the bedrock. They're the ones who provide the social stability, the trust that holds the whole thing together.
And this, right here, is the absolute core lesson. This isn't just about spreadsheets and wealth distribution. This is about the fundamental structure of a society. And the warning is clear. Whether we're talking about ancient Rome or right now, when you see a strong, healthy middle class starting to erode and disappear, that is a massive red flag. It's a sign that the entire structure is becoming unstable and is at risk of collapse.
Okay, so let's recap. We have a failing internal structure and a loss of meaning. What do? Well, you're faced with a choice. You either stagnate and fall apart, or you find a new, unifying purpose. The sources argue that what a civilization needs in a moment like this is what they call a great project. Something so big, so ambitious that it can pull everyone together and give us a shared goal to strive for.
And when you think about great projects, well, here's a quote from the guy who literally helped take us to the moon, Wernher von Braun. He gets at something really important here. He saw the push for exploration as more than just an engineering problem. He saw it as this deeply human, almost spiritual quest, a divine urge, as he puts it, to go beyond what we know.
The sources have a name for this. They call it the anthropological problem of space. And what it means is this: when we seriously start pushing out into the cosmos, we're forced to answer the biggest questions there are. Who are we really? What's our place in all of this? A huge project, like becoming a spacefaring species, forces us to decide what's truly essential about being human, what's worth taking with us to the stars. And that right there provides the exact kind of purpose that our modern world seems to be starving for.
Okay, but wait a minute. Is a big project and a ton of cool technology really enough to solve everything? The sources say no. There's a crucial missing piece to the puzzle here, a balancing force. And without it, our greatest achievements could actually become our biggest nightmares.
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This is the central tension of our time. We have power, like you wouldn't believe, insane technological power. But tech itself, it's neutral. It doesn't care. It's our wisdom, our ethics, our social and spiritual framework. That's the deciding factor. It's wisdom that will determine if we use all this power to build that paradise we talked about, or to just destroy ourselves.
So here we are. We've looked at the warning signs from the past, we've diagnosed the crisis of the present, and we've seen a glimpse of a possible future. It really all comes down to this: a choice, a decision we have to make about what kind of world, what kind of civilization we actually want to create.
This lays out the two paths in front of us as clearly as possible. On one side, you have the road to collapse. It looks familiar, right? Extreme inequality, a sense of stagnation and materialism, falling birth rates. It's the same stuff that weakened Rome. But then there's the other path, the path of expansion. This one's built on a rebuilt middle class, a great project that unites us, a future with demographic growth, and that all-important balance of our incredible power with the wisdom to use it right. So, the sources we've explored leave us with this final, really powerful thoughts. The future isn't written yet. There is a golden path, a way forward to a destiny out there, among the stars. But it won't happen by accident. It requires us to make a conscious choice, to take deliberate action. And when you look at the alternative, well, isn't that a journey worth taking?